Welcome to Didn't Get the Memo, a podcast dedicated to interviewing and gaining insight from ultra-successful individuals who departed from convention to achieve their success. James, thank you very much for your time this morning. Here we are sat in your beautiful, amazing shop, surrounded by very expensive and very interesting pieces. We just moved this sofa around, this chair around, I'm not sure, bench around, and we were a bit worried that we might take a leg off or something. It's probably worth about 20 million quid.
It is a lovely bench, I'll give you that. It's a lovely bench.
Not a 20 million quid bench?
Not quite
no?
20 million.
Oh, all right, okay, fair enough.
Very nice bench, nevertheless.
So we can reveal the damage that we caused a bit later on then.
Cheers.
No, but look, thanks very much. Here we are to talk about, obviously about you and how you got to where you got to. Didn't get the memo. What the podcast is about speaking to people who have achieved massive success. You've been massively successful in what you've done. You've bucked the trend. You've gone against convention, done something that's not been done before. And it's just trying to speak to you and understand how you did it, how you got here, and in a way kind of try and demystify the rules around success, because there are certain trends and traits that the successful people have, and I see many of them in you. So just want to have a little chat about that. But again, thanks very much, and we'll crack on. Clearly, we're in your shop, and there are people who be in and out, so we may be pausing at times.
Yeah, it's a bit buzzy, so it's a nice day. Yeah, we'll be getting a few visitors, hopefully.
Hopefully there'll be a few visitors. Hopefully we're going to have to stop multiple times.
You never know. We might buy the bench. We might end up on the floor.
yeah, exactly. So look, you've got a really interesting story, right? I mean, we're sat here. This is one of many shops that you have, and this doesn't happen by accident. But your starting life was somewhat a bit disjointed. A bit, you were a school dropout at quite a young age. It was 15 when you left school.
Yes. I was expelled from school when I was 15. So, yeah, I couldn't really. I don't blame them, to be honest with you. I was disruptive. I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah.
I used to, it's typical of. It was not a great time for me. Probably less of a great time for my parents, to be quite honest with you. But yeah, I was always in trouble. I just seemed to have problems with authority of any sort, really, to be honest with you.
Sure. And when they expelled you, I mean, at that time, were you mature enough to think, hold on a minute, this isn't a good thing, or was it a case of, do you know what, at least I'm away from these twits now, I can crack on?
Well, I didn't. I actually quite enjoyed the actual function of going into the school, because it was where hell was raised, to be quite honest with you. So I didn't.
And you were at the source of it.
Well, I was a little bit like the Pied Piper in that respect. So I quite enjoyed it. And so when I was finally expelled and they said, look, you're not included anymore, we don't want you on the premises, I was like, oh shit, what am I going to do now? I was sitting at home, I was 15, I was sitting, coming down for breakfast and sitting there with my mum all day. So it wasn't exactly exciting. So I wasn't that happy about being excluded, and it took a bit of time, to be honest with you, before I sort of found my feet in terms of any working or any work ethic, if you like. So I did various little jobs. I was a site labourer, and I did sort of manual work for a while, and then I managed to get a few quid together, and I went travelling, and that's where, after I come back from that trip, I sort of set my mind a bit straight, if you like, and realised I sort of came to terms with the fact that I probably wasn't actually ever going to work for anyone ever again. I was I think I was about 17 at the time. I came back to the UK, and I thought, I just got to crack on and make my own way, really. I've sort of was always fairly independent, even from a young child. So, I'd come home from school, walk home sort of 9, 10, make myself something to it. That wasn't really, I had a key. I was quite independent from an early age.
Sure. So on that, when you've come back from your trip, what changed? What was the real change attitude-wise for you? When you went, you were a different person. So who came back?
Well, it sort of dawned on me. I sort of looked at what had happened, and all through my sort of, early teens and the trouble I was getting into, and I thought, you know what? I could put this sort of energy to some. I've got some attributes. Probably I could put this to use. So I'm quite good at. I was always felt I had an eye for certain things, and I just started sort of putting my interest to use. Really, I was interested in cars, motorbikes, antiques, and I sort of just started on that road. Really, it first started with the cars. So, I was always tinkering with bikes, always getting in trouble with being brought home by the police to my mum. He's been riding around on his motorbike again. He's only 12.
And they're not his.
And they're not his.
Which is probably the most important bit.
Yeah, they're not his. The serial number relates to a microwave or something, that sort of stuff. It's just typical sort of delinquent teenage behaviour, really, to be honest with you. And but I was always tinkering with mechanical things.
But so always tinkering, but the attitude had changed, right? So it looked like you'd taken responsibility when you've come back, thought, I need to actually grow up a bit here. And the interest, I've always had them, but you just turned the interest into something that was more productive, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, even as a kid, I was always doing up motorbikes, taking them apart. My mum used to go absolutely crazy. She'd come up and then on my bed, there'd be an old bike frame and wheels everywhere. And, that sort of, and I'd be buying and selling them to other school kids. And I came back and I thought, what am I going to do? I'm sort of like 17. I've been shoveling shit for about a year on a building site. My feet have turned orange because I've been in so much sand. This can't really continue. And
no sunbed in sight.
No, that's right. So I thought, well, I actually like mechanical things. I'm quite good at taking something and making it worth a bit more, if you like. So I sort of turned that skill to the classic car. And I bought a car of someone, I think it was a couple of £100, £200 I think it was, 250 quid, and took the bumpers off, polished them all up, painted the wheels, did a few bits, and I think I trebled the money in within a sort of 2 or 3 weeks. And I thought, well, this is good. I've earned more money in this time than I have shoveling sand around in the last sort of 6 months. So that's how it all really started for me in the car game. And that escalated. So, I went from buying one car. It's always classic stuff because I like to do stuff that I enjoy, So buying stuff that was appealing to me. So old classic MGBs that went on to Jags and things like that. But at the beginning, it was something more affordable. Old Triumphs and MGs were sort of the bread and butter of what I was doing. And so buying those and sort of doing them up and selling them on was how I sort of got into started realising that actually I had a bit of a skill for sort of making a few quid. Sure. And I was supplying London with some of their, some really good dealers in London with some of their classic cars. So I'd go all over the country. I'd end up on trains. I would go up to Scotland, up into...
And how old were you now?
I was about 17, 18 at the time. So I was just flying around all over the place.
Making money.
And that was how it all started. And then what happened? I'm trying to think. So such a long time ago.
Yeah, just not that long. But you look about. Yeah, no, I was about to flatter you. I'll keep it to myself. I'm already in, and there's no need to keep flattering you. But So look, but when you left school, right, or rather, when you were asked to leave school, I'll put it that way. Were the teachers ever telling you what you'd amount to?
Yes, I mean, look, they'd always make you, and I don't really blame them. I was disruptive. Other kids couldn't learn whilst I was in a class. I'd want to be centre of attention. I wasn't interested if there wasn't a small fire going on or something, something like that. So, I mean, it wasn't just one day they came in and said, you can't come anymore. It was years of being excluded, being expelled, being allowed back. It went on for years, to be quite honest with you. And so I left just, prior to me sitting any exams. I didn't leave any qualifications. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but they did sort of make you feel like, with the exception of one or two actually, that were a little bit more, seemed to be a bit more caring about your future. But generally speaking, they didn't seem to understand and didn't really seem to care. It was, you're not going to amount to anything. Yeah. I know where you're going, Mr. Constantinou. I know where you're going to end up.
Starts with HMT.
Just basically, and if you drum that into kids at an early age, they start to believe it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It does. I don't think it has a positive effect on anyone's outlook. You want to try and build them up and look at their strengths. I'm not saying that it's an easy task, but we should look at the education system and about how kids are going through there. And I think looking at some of their strengths and maybe their practical. Some kids are great, maybe not academically, but they've got some other great skills that can be put to use, or they can thrive on those. There's lots of kids with a skill for something that maybe wouldn't be spotted in the conventional
absolutely.
education system.
On taking exams and books and so on and so forth. I mean, and as you say, no one really rises to low expectations and keep telling the kid that they're not going to be anything, and often they'll amount to that. It becomes their reality. But did you feel that you had a point to prove, and when you were doing well, it was kind of like showed you lot?
Well, I mean, I didn't set out with a point to prove because I wasn't really interested in what anyone else thought, to be quite honest with you. But obviously, when you achieve something, it makes you feel good, and you do reflect back on your school life and what went before and what people told you would amount to, including your parents sometimes. But so it does make you feel good, and I think that's an important thing to instill in youngsters if they can be made to feel good about themselves in some aspect. Everyone's got strengths.
Absolutely. So you're selling the cars and you're doing well. There comes a point when you stop selling cars and you pivot and move into something else, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I always sort of dabbled in cars. So I think it was first started for me when I sort of transgressed to the property market. So what I basically did was, when I was buying cars, I was buying something that was run down. I would take it away, make it look prettier. So I thought, well, I can adapt this to homes, really. I thought, we were coming out of a recession in the late 80s. So, interest rates had been high, the property market was collapsed. Mortgage lenders were keen to stimulate the market with some really great mortgage deals. They were offering cashback deals and almost zero deposits. So there was a lot of that going on. And I was able to get on I already had bought my own home when I was, I think, 19 or 20. But I managed to build up a portfolio of rental property quite quickly on the back of the crash in the 80s. And I was able to do it really by the mortgage offerings at the time that were out there trying to stimulate the market. So I built up a portfolio quite quickly. I think at one point I had about 20 odd houses, to be honest with you.
Right.
That was rented out.
It's an opportunity that presented itself. It's an opportunity that presented itself to many people in the country, right? It wasn't a secret that you could get mortgages and so on and so forth.
No.
You jumped on it, many didn't. And I'm just trying to identify and hone in on what is it that those characteristics that you have that make you realise that this could be something where many other people wouldn't necessarily.
Well, I mean, I adapted what I learned really from what I knew of in the classic car market. So, the first property I bought, I went and had a little look. The bathroom had been smashed up. I think it was a repossession. Kitchen had been ripped out. I did some quick sums. I thought, well, new kitchen, that's $3,500. A new bathroom, that's £1,000. I did the carpets and a repack. So you quickly add it all up, which is something I'm pretty good at. Mm-hmm. And I always get it I'm fairly good at that sort of. A lot of people would go away, they'd do a survey, they'd engage surveyors, they'd do their homework. I'm not really like that. I tend to work on a bit of paper, to be honest.
That's interesting, right? So, I Didn't Get the Memo, the series links to a book, and in the book I talk about the very same thing. When I wrote the book, I write this book in 30 days, and my rationale for it was I'm just going to bang it out myself. Otherwise, you can go and get a publisher, then they're going to slow you down, then you need a lawyer, then you need a this, and by the time everyone gets involved, the moment has gone.
Yeah, the moment's gone, and also it becomes too expensive to actually, it negates any gain, to be quite honest with you, a lot of the time. So I tend to I like working alone. And I'd probably take a few risks in that respect. I mean, I was quite lucky in the property market. I didn't buy anything with subsidence or anything like that.
Lucky, or you did your...
Well, I mean, I did...
What you could.
I did what I could and to the best of my ability, and it seemed to pay off.
And you had the confidence in yourself to make a decision and go with it, right? And if it went pear-shaped, you pick up the pieces.
Well, I think in this game, or in sort of any form of business, when you're starting out especially, you've got to be confident. Relatively confident in what you do. If you're not, then you're probably going to make some mistakes. I would think that's quite key. Yeah, you've got to be fairly confident in your ability to. And I couldn't actually see a negative. You know, people used to say to me, "Well, what if this happens and that?" I said, "Well, what's the worst case scenario?" Yeah. So if the worst case scenario was that I had my money back, then I would view it as a good business deal most times, to be quite honest with you.
Absolutely. And no doubt, I mean, you've pivoted on a number of occasions and you've done many things, and there are many people, no doubt, who will surround you and bring up the what ifs time and time again. And it is a case of rationalising those what ifs, not giving them more energy, more power than they actually deserve, and seeing what, even if it does go pear-shaped, what is the worst that can happen. But many people don't do that.
Well, look, your desire for gain must be greater than your fear of loss. Otherwise, you're never, ever going to go out there and try and earn a few quid, because you would just talk yourself out of every deal that you ever did.
Yeah.
I like to talk myself into deals, to be quite honest with you. I always look at the negatives and the what ifs to a degree, but if you studied it in great depth and worried yourself to death with every what if, you would never get it done, to be quite honest.
You wouldn't do anything, probably wouldn't leave your house if you really looked at every risk that's
and
out
there
there.
are people that do. I think the people that you're talking about that didn't go out at that time are people that looked into the what ifs more than I did, probably.
Yeah.
And studied them, and it concerned them. Maybe I take greater risks because I haven't got as many options as some of these people. They can go maybe into the city and go and get a job in the Gherkin or wherever they want to walk into. I haven't got that.
And that's an interesting point. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Again, just coming back to all the principles that obviously I speak to many people, successful people, even in this series. But because you left school with, and I'm just coming back to your very point, because you left school without qualifications, you didn't have the option. You didn't have the safety net to go and do something less risky. You had to take necessary risks. I'm not saying you went crazy with the risk, but you took risks because you knew this was my means of survival. I don't have the option of going and getting a job, sending in a CV, going elsewhere. So you needed to make it work. Where others, it's a luxury. They've got too many options, which I think can be a problem for them in many respects.
Well, yeah, I mean, who knows what would have happened if I'd have left school with 5 A levels.
Do you think you'd have been here?
Well, I don't know. I can't really say. I mean, but I don't think my personality would have been, if I'd have been the type to study to get 5 A levels, I probably would have been no good for this role, to be quite honest with you. But I may have had other options, and I may not have wanted to.
Let's talk about those other options, right? Just for a moment, right? And sorry to Steve, because you're saying some brilliant stuff here, which I think on the surface it sounds great, but when you dig deep, there is real sort of philosophical sort of insight to be had here. If you had other options, you had 5 A levels, is it a case of you wouldn't have been right for this, or you wouldn't have needed to make yourself right for this?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure that I would have had the desire for it, as maybe I wouldn't have been as hungry for it. I was hungry. I was hungry to have nice things and to live a nice life and to go on holidays and to drive. I was desperate to get my leg in a 911 when I had a Porsche 911. So, how was I going to get these things? I really had to put my arse on the line. And take some risks, and I think everyone setting out in the same sort of way that I did probably would have to take certain risks. As I said, I always feel it was a measured risk in many respects, and you're not going to win every deal you do.
No,
I mean, I've bought properties and lost money. Everyone has, but it's a roller coaster ride, and you've just got to know that generally you're going to have to go be on the up if you want to succeed. And as I said before, your desire for gain's got to be greater than your fear of loss. Otherwise, you're not going to achieve anything.
Sure. And those deals where you have lost, and all of us have made losses. If you're running, doing business and you're pushing, you're going to make loss. And I think there is that sort of thinking out there for people who play it safe that you don't make losses and we're superheroes and you get everything right all the time. When you do make a loss, what's your response to that?
Well, you just got to carry on, haven't you? You pick yourself up, carry on. You sort of learn from every mistake that you made. If it was a mistake, you might view it, even a loss might not be a mistake. It might have been an educated or an uneducated risk in some respects, and you may have been prepared to take that risk. I think that, as I said, as long as you go on and do another deal and that deal works or the next deal works and you carry on, I would never put myself in a position where one deal could possibly ruin me.
Sure.
I think that's the
roulette table, that is.
Yeah, I mean, you just wouldn't. I mean, obviously, when you're setting out, it's a very different thing. If you're buying one car and you're relying on that car selling, then it's you've got to be really careful. But nowadays, I think that you couldn't possibly do every single deal you do isn't going to ring the bell. But I wouldn't I wouldn't sell everything up and buy Bitcoin, for argument's sake.
No, absolutely.
I think that's an important point.
But even in this, amazing establishment that you have here, there must be deals that you do, and you're going to do deals where you you're going to lose money. You're going to get it wrong. But it still doesn't stop you from going out there and doing deals, right? It's part of the process.
Well, I always think about the deals that went right, to
Yes.
be honest. So obviously, you do want to learn from the deals that didn't go right, but you always think about, well, the next one could be right, so, and should be right, and it's got a good chance of being right, because out of the last 100 deals I've done, 95% of them have been right.
Sure.
So it's when you're doing deals that 50-50, or they don't, or you've got the margins are wrong, or the percentage you're getting it wrong a lot. I think then you've got to consider
Revisit.
getting back to school, getting your A levels, and getting up in the city.
Yeah, maybe getting expelled wasn't such a great idea after all.
Yeah.
So you've got your 20 properties, you're doing all right, you've got this rental portfolio, and things are starting to look okay for you in the property sector.
Well, the property market went boom, coming out of the recession, like it always does, to be honest with you. And I was just lucky enough that, I put myself in a position where I had a portfolio. The rentals more than covered the mortgages and actually gave me a living. And I was still buying and selling cars. And then I went into development. So I started looking at bits of land. So I thought, well, if I can take a house and make it look pretty, I can probably build one from the ground up. And that's really where when I went into development, property development, and bought a piece of land, built my first home. Then I got NHBC registered and started building new houses, which I really enjoy, and I still do. I still enjoy that side of, I've got a business, a development company, and I don't do hundreds of houses.
Sure.
That's not what I do. I do sort of one-off bespoke pieces. And
what do you enjoy about it?
well, I just really enjoy it. I really like seeing it grow out of the ground, to be honest with you, and knowing that it's going to be there for probably another 100. It's very rewarding, property development, if you're building something that you are proud of and that you enjoy. I built a block of flats once, and I just thought about, I have not enjoyed this at all. I don't like it. I don't like what I've achieved. I mean, financially it was great, but really I wouldn't probably do it again.
Sure.
But when you build something of beauty, or something that's aesthetically pleasing, it's very rewarding, and I get a kick out of it, to be quite honest with you. In the same way that I would if I bought an E-type Jag that had been sitting in a garage for 30 years and needed restoring.
Yeah.
When you see it come, it's satisfying.
Sure.
It's not always about the money. A lot of people think it's about the money. It's not really. It's about the mechanics of the money more than the actual money itself. It doesn't matter whether it's £100 or 10 or £100,000. It's sort of really irrelevant. I think it's more of the mechanics of the business that I enjoy personally.
Absolutely.
If it was about the money, I'd probably be a lot wealthier, to be honest with you.
Sure.
It's not only about that.
Yeah.
So it's more about the business for me.
So what's your view on focus? Because clearly you still do the odd bit of development. You have this empire that you're building here with Prestige, with the pawnbrokers. So how do you manage to split your attention and focus, and how does that work for you?
Well, it's quite difficult for me. I mean, I can't. I like to sort of keep my hand on, or a finger on the pulse in terms of what's going on. So a lot of people can relinquish a lot of that and hand it over to other people. I'm not really like that. I like to know the ins and outs of everything. Probably, the guys I might drive them mad. I phone them up. I'm in touch with them every day. I probably, I'm pretty hands on. Yes, I could probably do other stuff. I mean, I've got a development company, so we build new homes. We've got the pawnbroking. I've got a vending company as well. So we have got vending machines out in high footfall locations. So there's quite a lot going on, but I don't, I wouldn't do it if I didn't know what was going on with each business on a daily basis. That's not really how I work.
Do you think that any of those businesses, I'm sure they're all doing very well, do you think that any of them could be doing a lot better if your focus was 100% on those, or you're not?
Well, to be honest with you, Prestige and the pawnbroking is taking up pretty much all of my time. The development side is something that, it's because it's quite small and it's bespoke. It's not something. It's manageable. Yeah, you don't need to put in terms of the man hours. It's not every day. I mean, at the moment, we're not currently building anything, so it's not relevant. But and the other business, which is the vending business, is being run by other people, and it's all under control. So the pawnbroking that's where I'm focused right now.
Right.